Suzanne Madron was born in New York City and has lived up and down the East Coast. Currently, she resides in a house built over a Civil War battlefield in the wilds of Pennsylvania, where she's been known to host some interesting Halloween parties. She has authored several novels and stories under various names, including Susie M., James Glass, and Zircon. And Suzanne is our other birthday girl. Her birthday was Wednesday, so make sure that you give her a happy birthday in the chat, and I will put up her book and I will invite her to the stage. Susie, feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks for having me, and hello out there in the future. Um, I'll be reading from the fifth book in the Immortal War series. It's God in a House of Crosses, and I'm just going to start from the beginning where we meet our main character, Lily. Lily was at her usual table in the coffee shop when the screech of tires pulled her from the pages of Wuthering Heights. She glanced up to see what the commotion was and noticed a black SUV pull up to the curb. Nothing good came from an unmarked car hanging around any place, double bad when it had government license plates and no markings. With a sigh, she marked her page as men in suits as black as the SUV itself poured out from every door of the vehicle, then spread out like an oil slick on water. Here we go again, Lily muttered as she calmly slid the book into her messenger bag. She got to her feet and called out to the barista. Hey, Kevin, if those guys outside come in here asking about customers, you haven't seen me here today. I'm going to try and sneak out the back, but I'm not sure I'll make it. Just roll with it, all right? I'll think of something. The kid nodded to let her know he had heard her, but his gaze was locked in panic on the men in black suits as they approached the entrance to the coffee shop. The paper cups he had been stacking shook in his hands, and he looked about ready to bolt himself. Kev, she clapped her hands. Kev! He turned his face toward her, but his eyes remained in the windows. They aren't here for you. They're not? Then who are they here for? They're here for me, okay? He nodded and placed the shaking cups on the counter. He didn't seem to believe her. Okay. The suits outside glanced up and down the street, nodding to one another and touching the communication devices in their ears. After a moment of talking, they moved as a collective cliche toward the door. Lily slipped through the stock area and small kitchen as she made her way to the back of the coffee shop to the emergency exit. She knew it wouldn't be hooked up to the alarm because the staff used it frequently to both take the trash out and to sneak out to smoke in the alley on the other side. When she reached the exit, she paused and pressed her ears against the cold metal door. She could hear men's voices on the other side. There were at least three of them, and they spoke to one another in low tones. She looked up at the ceiling for a possible escape and groaned at the open industrial design. A drop ceiling would have made an excellent hiding place. Glancing around for an alternate escape route, her eyes fell on the barista aprons hanging on the hook by the door. She grabbed one of the aprons and tucked her phone into the front pocket before tying the apron strings around her midsection. The name tag said her name was Beth, and she took it off in case people got nosy and started asking too many questions. She wasn't sure how well Kevin would be able to improvise should the need arise, but she needed to assess her situation without him stumbling over her name. No one looked too hard at anyone wearing a uniform. It was as if the uniform removed the humanity it clothed and turned the person into an object. The thought struck her with its implications, but she put it from her mind. Today, she would have hated this aspect of a uniform, but today she intended to use it to her advantage. From the front of the shop, she heard the jingle of the bell over the front door as the suits finally made their entrance. She knew Kevin would do his best not to betray her. She also knew the men weren't local law enforcement. She wasn't sure who they worked for, but it wasn't anyone she wanted to meet. Lily moved fast and pulled her hair back in a ponytail as she kicked her messenger bag next to Kevin's backpack on the floor, under the apron hook. She grabbed one of the many bags of trash Kevin had placed next to the door with the intention of putting them out as soon as the flow of customers subsided. Hey, Kevin, she called loud enough for the suits in the shop to hear her and to interrupt them before they had a chance to start asking questions. You want me to take out the trash before I go? Kevin's voice shook, and he had to try twice to get it above a squeak. Sure, thanks. There was a pause, and then she heard him say, Hi, gentlemen, what can I get you today? Without waiting for a reply from the suit, she pushed the emergency door open and used her butt to hold it as she dragged the bags into the alley, tossing them out with an annoyed grunt. She hid a smirk when she heard one of the suits in the alley curse as he was forced to jump out of the way when she almost hit him with a bag of trash. The men prepared themselves for her to make a run for it, and she blinked up at them in what she hoped was a bored barista sort of way. Hey, sorry about that, she said in her most neutral tone as she gestured at the bags of trash. Didn't realize anyone was out here. Excuse me, mister. She nudged her way to the garbage dumpsters and left the bags of trash next to them. The suits relaxed as she moved back toward the emergency door and took the other bags out to the awaiting dumpsters. She judged both the distance she would need to run to get to the street, should she need to do so, and how fit the men in suits looked. They looked very fit, and she estimated she would need to outrun all of them for about 50 yards. She wouldn't make it. Time for Plan B. Calmly, she re-entered the building, leaving the door slightly ajar so the men in the alley would be able to see her as she hung up the apron and grabbed up her messenger bag. She began to push back through it as she called over her shoulder. Okay, Kev, bags are out, kitchen's clean, I'm off. See you tomorrow. See ya, thanks for taking out the trash, came the reply from the front of the store. As she exited, one of the suits stopped her and her heart sank. He looked identical to every other suit, right down to the painfully short haircut and dark sunglasses, and Lily wondered if there was some sort of secret agent surplus store where these guys shopped, or if their employer bought in bulk. Excuse me, miss, are there any other people in the coffee shop? Like, you mean customers or employees? Customers, the suit said with a patronizing smile. Lily shrugged. There was one person a while ago, but I don't know if they left or just, went to the bathroom. Can we ask you some questions? Asked another member of the Black Suit Brigade. He looked like he could have been a clone of the original speaker. She forced herself to look as annoyed as she felt. If it's quick, I guess. I need to get to my other job, and it's a hike. It'll only take a second. Suit number one reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and held out a piece of photo paper at her. Have you seen this woman? Lily wondered if these guys had gotten training from hell. They were a walking cliche right down to the suits and homogenized looks. At least hell has an excuse, she thought. It had gleaned all of its topside knowledge of style and fashion from old Hollywood noir films, so all the demons looked vaguely like Humphrey Bogart's stunt doubles, right down to the hand-rolled cigarettes. She suspected the suits might be the next generation of Hell's minions, and someone had forgotten to send out a memo. Hell loved its paperwork, after all. She stared hard at her own face in the photo and wrinkled her brow as if concentrating. Inside, her stomach was lurching. She didn't know how they'd found her or how they'd gotten close enough to take her photo. Luckily, she wasn't wearing makeup in the picture, and her hair was its natural color. She looked up at suit one and shrugged. She looks familiar. I think she used to come in here with her boyfriend, maybe. I think. When was that? About 6 months ago? Suit number two smirked and raised an eyebrow at her from over his dark glasses. You remember someone from 6 months ago? I remember her boyfriend, yeah. Lily grinned up at them. He was a hottie. Are they in trouble or something? Suit number one smiled reassuringly. No, we just want to talk with her. Do you know what happened to them? Lily shrugged and pretended not to notice the quick glances hidden behind the dark sunglasses of the men. I guess they broke up, because I haven't seen either of them in a while. She shifted her messenger bag on her hip and checked the time on her phone. We done here? I really gotta get going, like right now, or I'm gonna be late. The suits looked at one another, then back to her and gave a collective nod. Suit number one gave a tight-lipped smile. Thank you for your help, miss. Sure, no problem. Lily forced herself to remain calm as she walked at a hurried pace down the alley. She hoped she looked like someone who was late for their second job rather than someone who was trying to get away. As soon as she reached the street, she put on a pair of sunglasses and felt immediate paranoia. It felt as if she was being watched from every angle. Every tourist with a camera made her self-conscious, and she tried her best to hide her face as she faded into the crowds on the sidewalk. At the front of the coffee shop, the men in suits were asking Kevin if he had ever seen the woman in the photograph, just as Lily was making her escape. He stared at the picture and his lower lip trembled. Is she in trouble? That doesn't matter. Can you tell us if you know the woman in the picture? Kevin shook his head. I don't recognize her, no. Take a closer look. Was she a regular a few months ago? Kevin looked again at the photo, then stared up at his own terrified face reflected back at him in the lenses of the sunglasses. He shook his head. I've never seen her before, I swear. How long have you worked here? Kevin shifted his gaze to the other suit, and a different set of his own twin reflections stared back at him. A couple of years? And how long has the other barista worked here? Which one? The one who just left. His mind went blank, and he went on autopilot. I'm the only one scheduled for this shift. Immediately, he realized his mistake and clamped his mouth shut, but it was too late. The head suit smiled down at him. Thank you, Kevin. You've been a great help. Hold up! They changed the schedule! The suit smirked as they left the coffee shop, and Kevin called out after them. Hey, I forgot they changed the schedule! He stared helplessly after them, too afraid to follow beyond the counter and too afraid to call Lily to warn her lest they had the shop's landline tapped. As the men in dark suits exited the coffee shop, they paused. When the other suits from the alley emerged, they converged and climbed back into their vehicles. The leader of the operation dialed a number and waited. Someone on the other end picked up on the second ring. Report. We know where she is. Did you get her? Not yet. There were witnesses. The line crackled as the speaker on the other end paused. What is your plan? We follow her, and when the time is right, we get her. Minimal cleanup. Proceed. Lily rounded the corner and turned in the opposite direction of the entryway to the coffee shop. Her head was a mess of chaotic thought, and she tried to focus. Her first concern was, how had they taken her picture without her noticing? At least it was an old photograph, but still, if she made it away unscathed from this encounter, she would need to be more cautious, she knew. As she walked, she quickened her pace. She expected to hear the sounds of running footsteps behind her at any moment, but none came. As a bus passed by her, she changed her appearance. In an instant, her shoulder-length raven black hair faded to a golden brown and curled into tight ringlets. Her pale skin became light tan and freckled, and her height increased by 3 inches. By the time she reached the corner of the main avenue, she looked like anyone else in the village crowd, right down to the ripped blue jeans and faded band t-shirt. She followed a winding path, cutting into alleyways and side streets as she went, always careful to look around her. When she reached two other buildings, nearly butted up against each other, she sidestepped through the bricked-over passage that would have connected to the backs of the buildings and into an even older, soot-stained alleyway. As soon as she was through, and sure no one had followed her, she breathed a sigh of relief. Even more unease fell from her as the lights of the Limbo Diner blinked at her from the haze, reflecting off the puddles of standing water pooling between the worn cobblestones of the walled-off alleyway. She splashed her way to the door, heedless of the wetness seeping into her sneakers. Conversation stopped abruptly as she pushed through the door, and she winced at the way the bell sounded more like windows breaking in the silence. She smiled apologetically and scanned the faces turned toward her as she made her way into the diner. Asriel looked up from a book he'd been reading and stared at her for a moment, before giving a solemn nod of recognition. Nazarene. Lily nodded at the angel, ever impressed at the way he seemed to keep up with the times, no matter the century or the changes in fashion. His white dress shirt and black slacks were a classic look, and somehow fit his alabaster pale skin and wavy black hair. Like the other angels and demons, his eyes were a silver chrome that was startling to the uninitiated. Unlike the other angels, however, his wings were raven black, when he chose to show them, where the other angels' wings were white as freshly fallen snow. "Are you well?" asked the angel of death. Lily gave him an unsteady smile. "For the moment, yes, thank you." She continued past Asriel toward the back of the diner. As she passed the counter, she glanced behind it. The diner's would-be waiter was sprawled on the floor, overdosed again. The needle hung from his arm at an angle that was painful to look at, and his belt-turned tourniquet lay on the floor next to him like a sleeping viper. Vomit ran from his open mouth and across the tiles behind the counter, and Lily grimaced. Luckily, she'd not come to the diner for the coffee. If she was honest, the only person who had worked the counter who could make a decent cup of coffee was Cherry, and she had moved on. Cott sat in the last booth of the diner. At the sight of her, he sat up straighter and adjusted his tie. His typical lewd grin was already spreading across his lips as he said, "Well, hello there, fresh meat. You're lost." Lily held up a hand to stop him before he went on any further with his canned pickup line for wayward mortals. "It's me, Koth. Save the inappropriate flirting for someone who doesn't know you." The demon's brow furrowed, and he looked at her more closely as she slid into the seat across from him. As his silver eyes met hers, his face lit up with recognition, and he grinned. "You look different. Did you dye your hair or something?" Lily blinked at him, unsure if he was playing with her. From his expression, however, she saw that he was serious. "Yeah, something like that," she said, and decided to let it go. "I like it." He smiled at her and continued to contemplate her new appearance. "Thanks. So what brings you here?" he asked. "Don't you usually get your coffee over at that place on 6th?" Lily nodded. "Yeah, I do. I just left there, in fact." She folded her hands on the table in front of her and noticed for the first time that they were shaking. He followed her gaze and became serious. "What's wrong?" "I'm in trouble, Koth." "I like trouble," the demon told her with a wide grin that displayed row upon row of jagged teeth. His real teeth. The teeth that hid behind the human facade. "What do you need from me?"